You're not really married." Eleanor's voice cut through the elegant dining room like a knife, causing all conversation to halt. My mother-in-law stood at the head of the table, wine glass in hand, a triumphant smirk playing across her face. "The wedding was fake. That priest? Just an actor I hired. You've been living a lie for the past year." I watched as the color drained from my husband James's face. Around the table, his siblings and their spouses froze mid-bite, forks suspended in the air. The only sound was the gentle tick of the antique grandfather clock in the corner, counting down the seconds of this carefully orchestrated ambush. My name is Victoria Matthews, and at 32, I never expected to have my marriage declared fraudulent over Sunday dinner. But then again, I never expected a lot of things about Eleanor Blackwood. "Mom, what are you talking about?" James's voice trembled slightly as he reached for my hand under the table. I gave it a reassuring squeeze, keeping my expression neutral. Eleanor's smile widened as she set down her wine glass. "Oh, darling, I couldn't let you actually marry her. A small-town event planner with no family connections. She's so far beneath us." She turned her gaze to me, eyes glittering with malice. I had to protect the family legacy. The room erupted in chaos. James's sister Charlotte gasped. His brother Marcus started arguing with Eleanor, and his father Richard just sat there, staring into his whiskey glass like it held all the answers. But I remained calm, which seemed to irritate Eleanor more than any reaction she might have expected. "Nothing to say, Victoria? No tears? No dramatics?" I reached for my purse, hanging on the back of my chair. "Actually, Eleanor, I do have something to say. Or rather, something to show you." I pulled out my phone, taking my time unlocking it while everyone watched. "You see, after that strange conversation we had last week about wedding documentation, I decided to do a little investigating of my own." Her smirk faltered slightly. "What conversation?" "The one you had with your friend Margaret at the country club. You know, where you bragged about how you found the perfect actor to play a priest and how you'd make sure the marriage wasn't legally binding." I started scrolling through my phone. "You really should be more careful about where you have sensitive conversations. The ladies' powder room has surprisingly good acoustics." Eleanor's face went from smug to shocked in an instant. "You were there?" "Oh no, I wasn't. But my friend was. You remember Sophia, the new club manager you were so rude to last month? She happened to be in the stall when you came in. I found what I was looking for and held up my phone. She recorded everything." The sound of Eleanor's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "That little gold digger won't know what hit her. I've arranged everything. The priest will be an actor, the marriage won't be legal, and when the time is right, I'll reveal everything. James will have no choice but to leave her." I paused the recording. "But that's not all. After hearing this, I did some checking. Would you like to know what I found?" Eleanor gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "You're bluffing. The real Father Michael Thompson, who you thought was out of the country during our wedding, he wasn't. In fact, he was exactly where he was supposed to be, performing our ceremony. Your actor never showed up because Father Thompson arrived first. The marriage license is completely legal, filed with the county clerk's office the very next day." I pulled out a folder from my purse and slid it across the table. "Here are copies of all the documentation. Feel free to verify everything." The silence that followed was deafening. James picked up the folder with shaking hands, reading through the papers inside. His father finally looked up from his whiskey, and his siblings stared at their mother in horror. But how?" Eleanor stammered. "Did you really think I wouldn't do my due diligence? I'm an event planner, Eleanor. I triple-check everything. When Father Thompson called to confirm the ceremony time, he mentioned that someone had tried to cancel his services and hire a replacement. That's when I knew something was wrong." I took a sip of my water, maintaining eye contact with her. I just needed to figure out who was behind it and why. James stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Mom, how could you do this? To me? To us?" Eleanor's composure cracked completely. "James, darling, I was trying to protect you. She's not one of us. She doesn't understand our world." "No, Mom, you don't understand. Victoria isn't just my wife. She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And now," he looked around the table, his expression hardening, "now everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." I reached for his hand again, and he gripped it tightly. We had discussed this moment, planned for it. But the reality was still painful to watch. Family was everything to James, and seeing his mother's true colors was devastating. Eleanor sank into her chair, all pretense of control gone. "Richard, say something," she pleaded with her husband. But Richard Blackwood finally found his voice, and it wasn't what she expected. "I think you've said quite enough, Eleanor. Victoria, James, I believe we all owe you an apology." As the implications of what had just happened began to sink in around the table, I couldn't help but think about how differently this evening could have gone if Eleanor had just accepted me into the family. Instead, her attempt to destroy my marriage had only succeeded in exposing her own manipulation. The grandfather clock continued its steady tick, marking the end of Eleanor's reign of control over the Blackwood family. Dinner was definitely over, but this was just the beginning of a very different kind of family dynamic. The aftermath of that Sunday dinner spread through Boston's high society like wildfire. Eleanor's carefully cultivated image as the matriarch of the prestigious Blackwood family crumbled within days. It wasn't just about her failed attempt to invalidate my marriage. It was about the years of manipulation that the incident had brought to light. I sat in my office at Matthew's Events, reviewing contracts for an upcoming charity gala when Charlotte, James's sister, knocked on my door. She looked different now, less polished, more genuine than she had during all those strained family gatherings. "Victoria, do you have a minute?" she asked, hovering in the doorway. "There's something you need to know." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Over the past 2 weeks since the dinner, Charlotte had become an unexpected ally, sharing details about Eleanor's past schemes that even James didn't know about. "Mom's trying to sell the summer house," she said, settling into the chair. "The one that's been in the family for generations. She claims she needs the money for her fresh start, but I found these in Dad's study." She pulled out a stack of papers. I took them, scanning quickly. They were receipts for massive gambling debts, all in Eleanor's name. "How long has this been going on?" "Years, apparently. She's been borrowing against family properties, taking loans from Dad's business associates. That's why she was so desperate to keep you out of the family. She was afraid you'd discover her financial schemes." The irony wasn't lost on me. Eleanor had accused me of being a gold digger while she'd been systematically draining the family's resources. I thought about James, who was already struggling with the revelations about his mother. This would crush him. "Does your father know?" I asked, already suspecting the answer. Charlotte shook her head. "He's been so focused on the company, he just signed whatever she put in front of him. But now," she trailed off, looking troubled. "Now what?" "Now she's threatening to expose some of Dad's old business dealings if he doesn't give her what she wants. She's cornered Victoria, and she's getting desperate." I leaned back in my chair, thinking. Eleanor's desperation made her dangerous, but it also made her predictable. What exactly does she want? $2 million and a public statement from the family supporting her version of events, that the whole wedding scandal was a misunderstanding and that she was acting in the family's best interests. I couldn't help but laugh. She really doesn't give up, does she? "No," Charlotte agreed. "But this time we have something she doesn't know about." She pulled out one more document, a letter from Eleanor to her friend Margaret, dated just before my wedding to James. In it, Eleanor detailed not just her plan to fake the ceremony, but her years of financial manipulation and her methods for hiding money from the family. "Where did you get this?" I asked, reading through the damning confessions. "Margaret sent it to me. Apparently, Mom tried to implicate her in some of the schemes, and she didn't appreciate being thrown under the bus." Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from James. "Mom's called an emergency family meeting for tonight. Said she has an announcement." I showed the message to Charlotte, who grimaced. "She's going to try to control the narrative again." "Not this time," I said firmly. "I think it's time we show everyone exactly who Eleanor Blackwood really is." That evening, we gathered in the Blackwood family library. Eleanor stood by the fireplace, looking every inch the wrong society matron in her expensive suit and perfectly coiffed hair. Richard sat in his usual leather armchair, while James, Charlotte, Marcus, and their spouses arranged themselves around the room. I chose to stand, keeping one hand on the folder containing Margaret's letter. "I've asked you all here because I believe it's time to put this unfortunate situation behind us," Eleanor began, her voice carrying that familiar note of authority. "I'm willing to forgive the recent unpleasantness if we can come to an arrangement." James tensed beside me, but I squeezed his hand, silently asking him to wait. Eleanor continued, outlining her demands: the money, the public statement, the restoration of her social position. She was so focused on her performance that she didn't notice Charlotte slipping out her phone or Marcus moving closer to the door. When she finished, I stepped forward. "That's a very generous offer, Eleanor. But I have a counter-proposal." She blinked, clearly thrown by my interruption. "This doesn't concern you." "Actually, it concerns all of us, especially when you're trying to blackmail a family into covering up your gambling debts." The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." I opened the folder and began reading from Margaret's letter. With each word, Eleanor's composure cracked further. By the time I finished, she was gripping the mantelpiece for support. "How dare you," she whispered. "Those are private matters." "Private matters?" Richard's voice boomed from his chair. "You've been stealing from our family for years, and you call these private matters?" Eleanor spun to face him. "Richard, I can explain." "Save it," he cut her off. "Victoria, Charlotte, thank you for bringing this to light. I believe it's time for some real changes in this family." The next few minutes were chaos as Eleanor realized her carefully constructed world was truly crumbling. She threatened, she pleaded, she tried to turn the siblings against each other. But this time, nobody was listening. As security escorted her from the house, I couldn't help but think about how differently things might have turned out if she just accepted me as part of the family. Her determination to get rid of me had ultimately led to her own undoing. James wrapped his arm around my waist as we watched his mother's car disappear down the driveway. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, "for everything she put you through." I turned to face him, seeing the pain and relief warring in his eyes. "Don't be. Your mother thought she could break us apart, but she only made us stronger." Behind us, the Blackwood family was already beginning to heal, making plans to address Eleanor's damage and move forward together. Sometimes I realized it takes losing someone toxic to truly become a family. 6 months after Eleanor's dramatic exit, I stood in the ballroom of the Blackwood summer house, now transformed into a grand party venue. The house that Eleanor had tried to sell to cover her gambling debts had become the site of the family's renewal. Tonight was special. We were hosting a vow renewal ceremony for James and me, a way to reclaim our marriage story on our own terms. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that we were celebrating in the very house Eleanor had attempted to liquidate. As I adjusted the floral arrangements, old habits die hard, even when you're not the event planner. Charlotte approached with a magazine in hand. "Have you seen this?" she asked, showing me the society pages. There was Eleanor, photographed at some resort in Palm Beach, looking significantly less polished than in her Blackwood days. The headline read, "Disgraced Boston socialite seen working as resort activities director." I couldn't help but smile. She always did love organizing other people's lives. "Dad's lawyers found most of the money," Charlotte said, setting down the magazine. She had it scattered across different accounts, but they're recovering it slowly, though I doubt she'll ever be welcomed back into Boston society. The sound of laughter drew our attention to the garden doors, where James was chatting with his father. Richard Blackwood had changed dramatically since Eleanor's departure. He'd stepped back from the company's daily operations, focusing instead on rebuilding relationships with his children. Today he looked relaxed in a light summer suit, his usual stern expression replaced by genuine warmth. "Victoria," he called out, walking over. "Everything looks perfect, but you shouldn't be working at your own celebration." "Once an event planner, always an event planner," I replied, straightening his boutonniere. "Besides, this is different. This is family." The word hung in the air, carrying new meaning. Family, not the rigid, hierarchical structure Eleanor had enforced, but something warmer, more genuine. Just then, Marcus burst in, waving an envelope. "You'll never believe what Mom just tried." We gathered around as he opened a formal-looking letter. "She's demanding to be invited tonight. Says it's her right as the family matriarch to be present at all significant occasions." Instead of the tension such a demand would have once created, laughter rippled through our group. Eleanor's attempts to maintain control had become almost comical in their desperation. "Should we tell her the party was last week?" Charlotte suggested with a grin. "Or that we moved to Tibet?" James added. "Or," I said, taking the letter and deliberately dropping it into a nearby trash bin, "we could just enjoy our evening without giving her another thought." The ceremony itself was everything our first wedding should have been. genuine, joyful, and surrounded by people who truly cared about us. Father Thompson, the real one, officiated again, adding a touch of humor to the proceedings by checking everyone's credentials beforehand. During the reception, Richard clinked his glass for a toast. The room fell silent as he stood, looking more emotional than I'd ever seen him. "A year ago," he began, "I thought I knew what family meant. I thought it was about maintaining appearances, protecting our name, keeping to our own circle. I was wrong." He turned to face James and me. "Victoria, when you first joined our family, I let Eleanor convince me you weren't our kind of people. But you showed us what real family values look like. Honesty, courage, and unconditional love. You did just marry James, you helped heal this entire family." Tears pricked my eyes as Richard raised his glass. "To Victoria and James, thank you for showing us a better way to be a family." Later that evening, as James and I swayed to a slow dance, he whispered, "Any regrets?" About how everything turned out with Mom. I thought about Eleanor, about her schemes and manipulation, about how her attempts to destroy us had ultimately freed the entire family from her control. "None," I replied honestly. She tried to prove I didn't belong in this family, but instead she proved she was the one who never understood what family really means. James pulled me closer. "You know, she called me yesterday. Wanted to know if I'd support her moving back to Boston. And I told her she'd lost the right to dictate our lives the day she tried to invalidate our marriage. She didn't like that much." I glanced around the room, at Charlotte teaching her kids a silly dance move, at Marcus and his husband planning their upcoming adoption, at Richard actually relaxing and enjoying himself. I'd say we're doing pretty well without her influence. The summer house, once a symbol of Eleanor's materialistic values, had become something else entirely. A place where the Blackwood family could be genuine, where pretense fell away, and where love didn't come with conditions. As the evening wound down, I stepped out onto the terrace for a moment of quiet. The garden lights twinkled like stars, and the soft sound of waves from the nearby beach created a perfect backdrop for reflection. Eleanor had tried to prove I didn't deserve this life, this family. Instead, she'd proven that sometimes the people who try hardest to protect family traditions are the ones who understand family the least. I smiled, thinking of the irony. In trying to break us apart, she'd made us stronger. In trying to maintain control, she'd lost everything. And in trying to prove I didn't belong, she'd helped me find my true place in the family she left behind.